right up until I birthed, I was working 60 hours a week. And so being home with my son and just being able to rest and get to know him, it almost felt like a vacation, although I was sleep deprived, and just, I kind of felt like I was in a dream.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. Today's guest is Jennifer Whalen Hoeprich. She is a certified professional midwife with her practice Moxie Midwifery in Tempe, Arizona. She is also a board-certified hypnotherapist, a certified meditation teacher, and she lives in Chandler with her husband and her 12-year-old son, Vaughn. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Lori.
I'm very excited for you to be here. I'm interested to hear about your midwifery practice and about your meditation mama group. And the first thing I want to do is just start off just learning just a tad bit about you, about the family that you grew up in. And then we're going to go into your breastfeeding story. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
All right.
Yeah, as far as my family of origin, I was born in a small town, Water Valley, Mississippi, and its claim to fame in that area is that it has the one grocery store in the area called a Piggly Wiggly. That's where I was born. My mother was actually born at home in that same small town, lived there for about 5 years, and then we moved to Lake Havasu, Arizona, which is where I went to school. Yeah, and so lived there, and that's kind of like a retirement community. So Lake Havasu has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates. There's not a lot to do there as for teenagers. But I did a lot of just creative things at home. I made little magazines and got really into journalism and just loved writing. Before blog posts were a thing, I loved just writing little things that I've kept, since then.
So you have but you have a paper journal, old school.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Old school paper journal. Because I have a brother and sister, but they were both in their early and mid-20s when I was born. So I've never lived with them. So I was pretty much an only child.
Yeah, I would say so, growing up pretty much by yourself.
Right.
And I even said old school, but I think it's definitely coming back. There are journals in the bookstores. I know I always loved paper journals. I love the look of them and the feel of them and writing in them, and even coloring books are, the coloring books now for adults, they're making a comeback.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, actually, I know we'll talk about it a little later, but the meditation group that we're doing for pregnant mamas last week, that's what we did, was we colored these pregnancy affirmation coloring pages that were just beautiful. And yeah, it's wonderful. A great way for adults to kind of tap back into those relaxing times in childhood.
Yeah, I did that with my family during the holiday time. We're Jewish, and when we have a tradition of getting together with the ladies of the family and baking cookies for the holiday. And we make a whole day of it. My adult daughters, everybody gets involved, and we bake cookies, and we also do a craft. And each year, one of us pick a different craft that we do. And this year, I chose coloring books. And my mother, who's in her early 80s, my mother-in-law, who just turned 90, they were like, "You want us to color?" And I said, wait, just you'll see. And I bought really nice, which I also love, buying brand new coloring pencils and the books. And we laid it out on the table, and we had a meal, and then we had snacks. And they all made fun of me. But I have to tell you, it was the most fun time they've ever had. And they just really got so into it. And, you just sit and you start talking and the conversation just flows. And they were like, this is the best thing ever. Let's do this next year, too.
Wow. That's awesome. Isn't that so great? You got to introduce them to something so easy and simple, but yet so wonderful, for get-togethers.
Yeah, it was great. It was funny how much fun they made of me, though, because they're thinking of, Barbie coloring books or something, what we used to do years ago.
Right.
I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your very early breastfeeding experience with Vaughn. And the first thing I'd like to know is there anything that you did to prepare specifically for the breastfeeding experience with your son, as far as books, videos, classes, hanging out with other breastfeeding moms, going to La Leche League? Or did you just kind of wing it, wait for him to be born, and just assume it was all going to go nice and easy?
Well, I had read a little bit in Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. She talked a little bit about breastfeeding in there, and I loved that book. That was my go-to during my pregnancy. But that was pretty much it as far as preparing for breastfeeding. So I kind of just thought I would trust my instincts and kind of wing it.
And so tell me how it went. Where was your baby born?
My son was born at a birth center in Phoenix. It's no longer around, but it was called Bethany Birth Center.
Oh, yeah, very familiar with it.
Yeah, and so I had a really great experience there with him. And yeah, I remember, just first putting him to breast within, probably 20 minutes or so of my birth. And my first thought was, wow, really? Like all women do this? Because it was just kind of an intense feeling, And I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to get used to it, which I did. But yeah, it was a really beautiful experience, the first nursing session.
And so I imagine when he nursed the first time, were you still at the birth center?
Yep, I was still on the bed that he was born in, and I hadn't gotten up yet or anything. And yeah, my midwife helped me to deliver him, and then pretty much right away he was up in my arms and just kind of looking around, and then pretty soon after that he was rooting, and so I knew that was a cue, and so my doula who was there helped me to get him on the breast.
Cool. So usually you're home within 12 to 24 hours. Is that what happened with you?
Yes, and actually, yeah, I was home within, I left 2 hours after he was born. I was totally ready to go. And actually, one of my favorite pictures from that time was me in my bed nursing him maybe 4 hours or so after his birth. I loved that, just being able to be in my own bed and nursing him. It was great.
So when you came home with him and over the first couple of days, can you talk a little bit about, if you remember, the experience of going from pregnancy and the changes that you might be feeling in your breast tissue to the colostrum and that sense of your breast filling with milk? Was that really strange for you?
It was wonderful, actually. I remember, because I've always had small breasts, and so I remember, when I first got engorged, right around whatever, day 3 or 4 or something like that, and I was like, wow, my breasts look awesome, it's great. So I was lucky. I didn't have a lot of issues with, dealing with engorgement because I just nursed on demand. So it was just, maybe 24 hours of that tenderness and figuring out the latch, but we didn't use a pump or anything to help. I was just pretty much in bed with him, nursing him whenever he wanted to.
And I love moms hanging out in bed and nursing their babies. Did you have any concerns about that, or anybody else that you lived with have concerns about you laying in bed and breastfeeding?
No, I don't think so. It was my husband and I, and then his sister had come to stay with us for 2 weeks. And even though she didn't have any babies of her own at that time, just having her there was amazing. She would, clean up a little bit, sweep the floors, help to make some meals. And so I didn't feel like I needed to be really doing anything besides just relaxing and bonding with my baby.
And were you the type of person, it sounds like it, that you were happy to be doing nothing but relaxing and bonding? or it doesn't sound like you're that type of personality who felt like she needed to get up from the birth and start making sure everything is clean around the house and taking care and feeding other people. It sounds like you were very happy to have people taking care of you.
Yeah, I definitely was. And at that time, it was like I was living a completely different lifestyle than I live now, because at the time I was a manager at a health insurance company. And so even right up until I birthed, I was working 60 hours a week. And so being home with my son and just being able to rest and get to know him, it almost felt like a vacation, although I was sleep deprived, and just, I kind of felt like I was in a dream the time those first few days. Yeah, I didn't feel any pressure or any need to be doing any housework or cooking or entertaining or anything like that.
That's fabulous, particularly coming from what you just described as a 60-hour work week to now all of a sudden just hanging out in bed. Some moms have a problem doing that.
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment, but it was welcome for me because I knew I was going to be at home for 6 weeks. I only took 6 weeks off work. So I was just really wanting to make the most of that with my son.
And so do you remember, besides being sleep deprived, did everything else seem to go fairly smooth? You felt like you had enough milk for him and he was able to have a feeding that was painless for you and gain appropriately?
Well, within about, I think it was like day 5 or 6, something like that, I started to have some pain in my nipples and I started to even bleed a little bit. So I called the birth center and they had a nurse who would come out to see me in my home to help me with that. So she came out and watched me latch and, just helped me to get a better latch for him. But, I would say it was like a good, maybe close to a week before my nipples totally healed. And I was using Lancino and cool packs and stuff like that. But yeah, it took a while for that to heal. So I think that I actually didn't have a really good latch in the beginning, but I didn't see a lactation consultant or anything like that. So I was just kind of basing it on what I'd seen in pictures and books and stuff.
And again, here, it's been a while, but now you're also a midwife. So do you have any recollection of what you were doing and the adjustments that you were shown to make it better?
Yeah, the main thing was, just making sure that his mouth was open really wide so that it was like what I was told was like he was going to take a bite of a big old hamburger, that like he needed to open that wide before I put him on. And also putting him on quick, basically taking advantage of that really wide open mouth to right away put him on with that. And I think that helped because I think what it was is I had a really shallow latch. So it seemed like once he opened wide and I was looking for that cue and then putting him on right away, then that's what seemed to, eventually help and I didn't have pain anymore.
Yeah, it's a very common occurrence. As moms, we just, the babies are so new and we just kind of hold them close to the breast, and when they open up a little bit, we bring them on kind of gently, which then creates this what we call a shallow latch, which rather than getting a nice amount of breast tissue and the nipple far back in their mouth, they wind up suckling or biting just the tip or the base of your nipple, causing it to get sore, and then if that continues, sometimes to bleed. And for most moms, the very simple answer is just what you said, a nice wide open mouth. And you also said to bring them on quick. So I usually tell moms when they open wide, you just got to seize the moment and move quick.
Yeah, exactly. So once I knew to look for that and take advantage of that, then things got a lot easier.
Perfect. Tell me a little bit about the transition going back to work. Now, were you looking forward to it and some adult time, or were you kind of sad to leave the baby?
Well, I dreaded it, to be honest, because I loved the connection he and I had. But I went back to work at 6 weeks, and he was in daycare for about 9 or 10 hours a day, Monday through Friday, starting at 6 weeks. It was really hard. And so I was pumping at work, and luckily my job was great. They gave me blinds for my office, so I could just pump in my office, which was wonderful. and I could pump as often as I wanted to, but I was still struggling with this mindset of, I have to, get everything done just the same as I did before, and kind of caught up in the rat race. And so I didn't pump as often as I needed to. I would wait, like 4 hours or sometimes 5 hours between my pumping, even though at home he would be nursing every 2 hours. And so it really resulted in a diminishing of my supply. And so after about maybe a month or two, I started doing some supplementation with formula, like, half breast milk or something like that. Around half the bottles were breast milk and then half were formula. And I was nursing at home directly with them. But then, within about 4 months of doing that, my supply had just diminished so much. I was barely getting anything. And so we switched over to formula at that point.
So at the time, did you know that the less pumping you did, the less frequent you did, that may result in decrease in supply?
I don't think I understood to the extent that would happen. So, I think I had maybe read somewhere that you need to be pumping as often as your baby nurses, but I don't know. I think I was so caught up in the moment at work and so distracted with what I was doing at my job, and I felt there was so much pressure that I imposed on myself to really keep up, and be doing just what I was doing before I gave birth, that I think I allowed that to get in the way of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. If we're fortunate enough that our employers are not pressuring us, frequently it's our own selves that are pressuring us with keeping up with everything that you did in your life before you had a baby, and then to do everything that you need to do as a mom now having had a baby, in everything caretaking, and then pumping. And pumping is certainly bringing on, I think, another full-time job when you're pumping at work. So if you had to do that part over again, knowing what you know now, what in that scenario would you do different?
What I would do is I would not go back to work. What I've seen, with my clients over the years is that it seems like for a lot of moms, when they have a part-time gig, something where they can still be social, and make a little money for the family, and then but the majority of their time is spent bonding and being with their child. It seems like a lot of moms who choose that have a really high level of just overall happiness and satisfaction in their lives. So if I could do it over again, I think I would have quit that job and maybe just done something part-time that I enjoyed and just worked it out financially, just worked it out with my husband at the time.
Because that there were probably ways that you could have cut corners at the time. Some people just cannot, but other people can. So it sounds like there are ways, having thought about it and taken a look back, that are probably ways you could have cut corners that would have enabled you to stay in the workplace, make some money, have some, your adult contact and be sociable, and yet plenty of time to be with your baby so that you weren't relying on so much pumping.
Right, exactly. And there's all kinds of options. Like I may have been able to get a part-time job in a different department at the company I was already with, or maybe just doing something completely different. Yeah, I feel like there's always a way, to work that out. Because my husband was a teacher, so he didn't have a high salary, high paying job, but it was enough. I feel like we probably could have worked it out, because I think I would have been a lot happier and more satisfied just overall. Because I actually think too, Lori, that I experienced some postpartum depression that, never was diagnosed. I never went and saw anybody about it. It wasn't anything that was debilitating. Of course, I was still working, 50 or so hours a week at that point. But yeah, I feel like, my own, connection with my son, my own sanity, my own level of happiness and joy in life. If I could do it over again, I would prioritize that connection with him, really to help me with that.
And with regards to, you brought up postpartum depression, and it certainly sounds, Jennifer, like it wasn't severe, that you needed to seek help. But is it years later in hindsight that you realized you were probably going through that?
Yeah, it was. It really was when I started studying for midwifery, I became a doula first, and it was through that coursework that I started to learn about postpartum depression. So I really hadn't researched it much myself when I was pregnant. And so it was really through researching it and looking at, the symptoms and the signs of that where I was like, wow, I really had a lot of those things going on for me.
And it's quite prevalent, and I think we talk a lot more about it, and yet it's still often not diagnosed at the time. Many women that I talk to, they do realize years later. The other interesting thing is when people are looking and thinking about postpartum depression, what's talked a lot about is those sensation of feelings that happen within the first couple of weeks or month or two. And nobody's really talking about a degree of postpartum depression that can be months and months and months later, and easily still within the first year of your baby's life. And I imagine that you see that in your practice.
Well, in my practice, I work with moms up till 6 weeks postpartum. And so we do a lot of work together prenatally. I think that's the time to, really prepare someone for recognizing postpartum depression. And so that's where we do a lot of our talking about it. And then, I'm blessed because in my practice, I actually go into their home, 1 day postpartum, 3 days postpartum, 1 week postpartum. Then they're seeing me again at 3 weeks and 6 weeks, and we're constantly in, texting and phone communication. So for me as a provider, there's lots of opportunities for me to be checking in and making sure that the mom is doing well and, finding other resources if she's not. And so I think, that I have a better handle on that than I think, maybe a provider who is in like a huge practice or like more of an obstetrical practice, could have. Even still, I just actually attended an ICANN meeting last night, International Cesarean Awareness Network meeting last night, where the focus was maternal health and wellness, and they talked about postpartum depression at length. And I just decided for myself that I'm going to offer to my clients to see. There's a licensed professional counselor in the Valley who focuses specifically on postpartum. And I'm going to offer for my clients to see her prenatally to kind of develop a plan, and then a follow-up visit with her postpartum as well. Because I feel like we need so much attention on this, and it's just not paid very much attention to in our culture.
It definitely is not. And what I've learned over the years is that if you've ever had any issues with anxiety and depression before pregnancy, you're at risk. Some moms, a lot of people just don't really understand this, but there are moms who are depressed to a certain degree or a larger degree during their pregnancy, and even that goes undiagnosed. And then, of course, both of those, pre-pregnancy and during pregnancy, puts you at a risk factor for once the baby's born. So the fact that you recognize this, and what I love about midwives is that you're all about prevention. And so you're seeing that there's a need here, and you're going to make connections with moms, with people in the community who can be helpful before, during, and after. And how much better can we get?
Yeah, absolutely. Women deserve that. We deserve that level of care and attention for sure.
Taking a little break so I can share this info with you. I am really psyched to be able to share this next piece of news with you. My regular listeners are very familiar at this point with Momentum, the organization that I talk about on each show. You know, the one that I say saved my life as a new mother. The organization that helped me find other mothers who were new at this whole mothering thing. They became my people. They helped me navigate that first year of motherhood and continue to mother me as I had more kids, and my need for support through their toddler years and kindergarten years and elementary school years just kept being needed. I made lifelong friends, and they were so helpful that I am doing all I can to continue to support the organization. I want Momentum to continue to thrive, and I want you, my All About Breastfeeding audience, to experience just some of what Momentum is all about. The ladies of Momentum have agreed to give my listeners a 14-day trial membership so you can see what this mother-centered thing is all about at no cost to you. Just hop on over to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. You will see a link from Momentum. It's in blue, and you just click it on and it will bring you to the page for you to sign up for your free trial. Honestly and truly, there's absolutely no cost to you. This is just a great opportunity for you to enjoy the discussion groups and the blogs and webinars and educational pieces that are available for free for you. I will have a link to this in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Tell me, based on your personal experience and what you've learned about breastfeeding through your pathway to midwifery, what you talk about with moms, how you approach moms, and what you do during prenatal visits leading up to the birth that will help them have a pretty good understanding of what they might expect for the early days of breastfeeding. Because as a lactation consultant, day in and day out, there are like the top 10 things that I hear all the time. There's a bunch of stuff I hear all the time, but today I had 3 appointments before this call, and each one of the mothers said something along the lines of, it's just talked about how beautiful breastfeeding is and how healthy it is, but nobody ever talks about how hard it might be, the problems that you might have, or just how tired you really are, how frequently babies feed. They never really tell me what I really need to know.
We start talking about breastfeeding usually in the 3rd trimester. And so most of my moms have some books that they're reading. There's the Leche League books. There's a few different ones that I have in my lending library too, so you can borrow those. And then I also talk about community, because I actually feel like the community piece is really vital for success with breastfeeding. So I encourage all of my clients, when they're still pregnant, to find their local Leche League meeting and just kind of get to know some of the moms there and hear some of their stories. And then I also provide them with the information for the local free breastfeeding groups that they can go to Postpartum. And I encourage all of my clients to go to those, because I feel like they're so perfect, because you can bring your baby, and if your baby is crying, or you need to change their diaper, or you need to be late, or you need to leave early, it's like totally cool. Everybody is dealing with the same thing. So I love the groups. I always recommend that, to the moms to create that community for themselves. And then I talk about, within the first hour or so after birth, myself and my 2 assistants are there to help with making sure that first latch is comfortable and that she's feeling really confident. Like, we actually have a checklist before we'll leave a birth, and one of the items on there is if the mom is feeling totally confident with breastfeeding. She's nursed, she's had a really good session, there's no, weird lingering things going on. And then, I let my moms know prenatally as well that there'll be a lot of follow-up with that, and that we have amazing, fantastic lactation consultants here in the Valley who are available to them. And so that's another thing, too, is that I don't delay. If I have a mom who's got some serious issues that are going on, where it's not just a latch and then we fix it. If it's anything beyond that, or maybe I suspect a tongue tie or whatever it is, there's anything going on where she's uncomfortable, within those first 2 or 3 days, then I always recommend for her to go ahead and seek out that assistance from a lactation consultant. Lori, but a lot of people don't. How many hours do you have to have before you get your IBCLC? It's like thousands or something. It's just, people don't understand the intricacy of assisting a woman with breastfeeding. There's so many little things that can be off where you make what can seem like a minor adjustment, but it's like the one thing that does the trick. So, for me, yes, I'm a midwife. I have training in breastfeeding, and yes, I have my own experience with my son. I see a lot of women breastfeeding, but I'm not an IBCLC. So I let my clients know that too. I can assist with the little things, if there's a little nuance thing here or there, but if there's a real issue, we want to get on it. We don't want to wait,
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that and for talking about that out loud. It is always such a hard thing because sometimes I try and make this relationship with other care providers that, I was a birth doula also, and I primarily, a big portion of my clients were giving birth at home or birthing centers, although some were giving birth in the hospital. But just that, the care that they got, first of all, you're risked out if you're having any big medical issues. Right. And so by the time you wind up being brought into a practice, that the rate of transfer or issues is very low to begin with. And so I could say, I went to 50 births and they were all really great and wonderful and loved it. And, then I could hang out my shingle if I wanted to. So I had, some people who were doing that, and that's not really the cool thing to do because we really need to see the stuff that's hard and that's not working well and that, moms are having problems and complications as a midwife, or so that when they have that going on as an experienced midwife, you know and you're able to recognize that. So to just say that you went to a bunch of births and everything was really cool and now you could do that is really being quite negligent, right? Mm-hmm. Because you know that there's so much more that you need to know. And I think it's the same thing with breastfeeding. Sometimes when people have a good experience with breastfeeding or they've taken a shorter course and they just think, wow, this is fairly easy and I can help moms. And while that is true, but part of the problem is not being in the trenches like you are as a midwifery student for how many births and how many hours and how many catches, right? That if you just put that aside and only take all the good stuff and you never see when you do have a problem, you just don't recognize it and you don't know how to help them and things can go by the wayside. And it's the same thing with lactation. So here you are saying you've nursed a baby and you were successful and you've helped tons of moms, but you know that if it's not going well, maybe you're not quite sure how to fix it. Maybe that's, you're not able to take that time intensive that you need to work with a mom to help her figure it out. And it sounds like you really know what the risk factor are in waiting too long. So that's the point I really wanted to make, in that sometimes I see moms with care providers, they're just told, give it a week, give it 2 weeks, give it 3 weeks, it'll just get better. And meanwhile, what happens during that time period? We often have a fall off of moms breastfeeding or more supplementing or more pumping because the pain is getting worse, the transfer is less, the supply is lower, and we're losing valuable time. So I really appreciate that you recognize the fact that this is very important and we need to fix this sooner rather than later. So one of the things that I talk to moms about, because frequently they'll be like, well, how come my doctor didn't say anything or do anything? He's told me to, my pediatrician told me to, just go home for another week, keep working at it and come back a week from now and then we'll see. And, my beef with all that is I just don't feel like with some care providers that there is what I call a sense of urgency, meaning, if there's any other health issues, like we're writing out a script for a referral to someone else. We want you to see someone else. This is urgent. You got to take care of this like now. And with breastfeeding, it's kind of like a come see, come saw, let's give it a little bit more time. And I want our physicians to have a sense of urgency. Like you're having a problem, your nipples are sore, it's bleeding, your baby isn't gaining weight, you're needing to supplement. Here, we got to fix this now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the moms who do then, seek out that assistance early on like that, then it's like, okay, it just takes a couple things to make these adjustments, have someone sit with them and really, create the plan. And then it's like they're good to go. It's not like they need, usually, it's not like they need to see, a lactation consultant, every day for a month. Or, it's just usually 1 or 2 visits and they're good to go. And, what a worthwhile investment to make for the long term,
Of course, you're preaching to the choir here, right? But it's just so wonderful when I meet other care providers that really get that, frequently the fix is easy. The quicker we do it, the sooner we do it, the quicker the fix is, the quicker you get on to happy, comfortable, easy breastfeeding, and the recognition that there's no reason to keep waiting and waiting and waiting for this magic wand and something to get better. Just go and get help. And just like you said, it's not something that's this ongoing, many multiple visits. And again, with a worthwhile investment.
Absolutely.
I would love to hear a little bit more about, I heard you say that you became a birth doula. Was that your first entry into the world of breastfeeding, birthing, and moms, or were you a childbirth educator first?
Well, yeah, I started off, I knew I wanted to be a midwife right after I had my son. It was literally in the moments after he was born that I feel like I got this divine inspiration that I wanted to be a midwife. So I really entered into my doula career because I looked at it as a pathway into midwifery, because I knew I wasn't ready to take that on, having just had my son just yet. So I got certified as a doula. That was when my son was about 6 months old. And then I started doing doula births, and I was in a partnership for 2 years here in the Valley. And so at that time, that was, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And at that time, there were only, maybe 15 or 20 of us doulas in the whole Phoenix metro area. So we really got to know each other. And so most of my births at that point were hospital births. And so through the course of my doula work from 2004 through about 2009, I had attended over 200 births. So I was really busy during that time with doula births, and I loved it. It was great.
Tell me if you remember when you first started out as a doula, the first few births you went, and 200 births later. What are a couple of the bullet points that whatever your perception was when you started, what was different by the time you had 200 births under your belt? Oh,
gosh. Wow. Well, I think, because when I was a doula, like I said, most of my births were hospital births. So a lot of it was, just making sure that they had a really great care provider, because, early on in my doula career, I had this idea that if they hired me, that I would be able to, help them have everything that they wanted on their birthing plan, that I'd be able to be this advocate who could help them with that. And I mean, of course, I'm an advocate in the role of a doula, but, all doulas, we don't speak on behalf of our clients to the medical staff. And so what I found was that clients would have these ideas for what they wanted for their birth, and we discuss it at length and put it down on paper. And I even went with my clients to meet their care provider and go over the birth plan, like in the room with them. And most of them were like, oh, yeah, just so long as you're good and baby's good, then, yeah, that's fine. We can do that. But then what I found was when we actually were in the hospital, maybe it was a different care provider or it was the same one, but there was, maybe some minor, concern with the heart rate tracing or something. And then now all of a sudden my client couldn't, go do intermittent monitoring. She had to do continuous monitoring, or now all of a sudden she couldn't use the shower, or, so what it got down to for me towards the end of my doula career was I just started, when I would get a call from someone who was interested, I would ask, who's your care provider? And if they were with a care provider who wasn't well respected in the community as far as respecting their wishes, things like that I would invite them to really consider, choosing a care provider who, even if the doula wasn't there, would be respectful of them and would listen to them and would naturally want them to be birthing. Because, most of my clients who hired me as a doula wanted to birth naturally. So I would say, hiring a care provider who actually gets why you want to birth naturally, like maybe one who's birthed naturally herself, or at least understands why you want that. So it's interesting, the more that I went through the process of being a doula, the more I realized how important the care provider and the birthing location, the hospital, that's huge as well. So I would really I got to a point where I was like, to my clients in interviews, I would say, it's more important for you to choose a care provider who's going to naturally be on board with you than it is for you to hire me as a doula. Like, if you have to choose, go with the care provider who's going to be more naturally supportive of you for real. And so that was an interesting thing for me over the course of those years to discover.
That was incredibly wise of you, and incredibly, I'm going to use the word ballsy, because sometimes when that happens, you're staying true to your heart, and yet you also know that there's a potential that you could lose a client. But it sounds like you really had started to come to the conclusion as to how and with whom you could shine, you could do your best work, with the realization that if there was a certain provider that, as a birth doula, I was kind of like the same way to a point, like, I can't really do my best if you're not with the best.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if you're with a care, there's a practice where there's 14 OBs, or something like this, and you've brought your birth plan in and the one OB has said, okay, but then you have, no clue who's going to actually be with you at your birth. If it's a teaching hospital, for instance, sometimes, they have providers there who their long-term goal is to be a podiatrist, but they're on an OB rotation. They're really not going to understand that you want this sacred, spiritual, protected birth experience. They're just not going to get it. There's nothing wrong with them, as a human being. They're just not going to understand.
That's a wonderful and perfect way to put it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in 2009, something shifted. Is it at that time that you became a midwifery student?
Well, I actually started my apprenticeship in January of 2008, but I was still doing some doula work. There was some overlap for me. But yeah, I felt like, okay, my son at that point, he was 4, and so he was a little bit older, and I felt like, all right, I think I can hop into this now. And I was really ready to be out of the corporate world by that point. I had finally had enough, which was great. So yeah, at that point, I was so lucky. My preceptor, my midwifery teacher, I was at a birth with her as I was a doula. I was in the role of a doula. She was the midwife. And it was a long birth, and I was literally with my client for 40 hours straight.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a hospital transport, and, she ended up birthing vaginally after all of that. It was just amazing. But so at that birth, the midwife who was there pulled me aside, a couple weeks afterwards and asked me out to lunch, and she said, Jennifer, you know that you're a midwife, right?
Oh, that was so sweet.
Yeah, I was like, yes, I do actually, because like I said, the doula thing was more, to just get my feet wet, because I knew eventually I did want to become a midwife. So she invited me to be an apprentice of hers, and it was just the best decision I ever made, and I loved it. And she's amazing and wonderful, and I'm going to say her name, Wendy Kleckner. She's just incredible, and I just love and adore her to this day.
Fabulous. It was, I think when I see a woman who's in a doula position, I could tell when she was meant to be a midwife. And so how wonderful of Wendy to recognize it. Probably didn't take much at all, I can imagine, for her to recognize that you needed to start your apprenticeship.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, absolutely.
I would love for you to talk about the Meditation Mamas group, and if you could relate it at all to moms, if you can at all, during pregnancy or in the early days postpartum, moms who are breastfeeding, and kind of tell us a bit about your group.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, the group, it's a weekly group where we get together. Right now it's Monday evenings, 6:30 to 8, at my practice in Tempe. And so we have a different theme each week. Like I said, we did coloring meditation last week. We do candlelight meditation and Vipassana. So it's a sampling each week of a different type of meditation. But one thing that we do every week is a guided meditation. And so that's a huge project that I'm working on right now, is actually creating guided meditations. So they're scripts that I write that are specific to pregnancy, breastfeeding actually as well, and also postpartum and birth too. And so it's kind of like hypnobirthing. It's a similar concept where there's a script that I'm reading and just encouraging a woman to relax. And it's a way of getting into a meditative state without you yourself having to be an expert meditator. So it's like somebody literally guiding you into meditation. So we always end each of the groups with that for about a 10 or 15 minute guided meditation. So with meditation, the benefits during pregnancy, there are a few different studies out there about that. One of the studies talks about the chemicals that get released in meditation that also cross the placenta. So a main one of those is melatonin. And so melatonin is what gets released in your body when you're watching a sunset, if you're in a candlelit room. And it's what causes you to be really relaxed, get kind of sleepy. So interestingly, when you're in a meditative state, you also have melatonin that gets released and it crosses the placenta. So your baby also gets those benefits of being bathed in those happy, relaxing hormones. So I have, like I said, some guided meditations that are specifically written for breastfeeding as well. So there's one that's written for moms to listen to while they're actually nursing. And it's all about, sending that love into their baby through their breast milk, really affirming themselves for everything that they're doing, both for themselves. There are numerous health benefits for breastfeeding for mothers. Also, of course, numerous health benefits for their baby with breastfeeding, but also, more subtle things that they might not be thinking about, like the financial benefits for their family that they're breastfeeding, the benefits on the environment that they're breastfeeding, that they're not using can after can of formula, for instance. So, yeah, it's wonderful for moms to really be able to take that time for themselves, to relax, rejuvenate. And when a mother has a full cup, she then has something to give, So it's all about that. The groups are all about nourishing the mamas and nourishing the baby so that everyone in the family is taken good care of.
In the group that you're running and the work that you're doing, it's once a week. And what happens to the moms in between? Do you have a tape or a script for them to work with when they're home?
Well, that's the big project right now. So I'm in the recording studio, and it's been about 6 months now. I'm kind of doing it as I find time, but I've created a repertoire of these guided imagery scripts, and I'm doing recordings for those. And I have a local friend here who's doing these beautiful singing bowls behind the words, so it's really relaxing. And she's also a mama. She's a home birther, and her baby's a little over a year old, and she's still going strong with her nursing and everything still too. And so it's been a really wonderful collaboration. The grand vision is that there'll be an iPhone app that'll be created that'll have this repertoire of all these meditations that are specific to pregnancy, breastfeeding, birth, and postpartum. So there'll be like different categories for all of them. And there's like a morning meditation during pregnancy where you're connecting with your baby, sending love to your baby, sending positive energy for the rest of your day. There's an evening meditation where you're thanking yourself for everything you accomplished that day, thanking your baby, and it assists with restful sleep. There's one for, like morning sickness, for nausea to help ground you. So, for all different aspects of pregnancy, issues that are going on in pregnancy, there are several that are written specifically for the birth to prepare moms, mind, body, and spirit for the birth. Also ones that can be listened to actually during their birth. Breastfeeding ones, and then also ones for postpartum for just, again, giving themselves that credit, because postpartum, sometimes it's like the biggest accomplishment of the day is that you got a shower, and that's actually, it is a real accomplishment.
It is. We laugh, but it really is.
Yeah, it really is. So just, affirming themselves for everything that they're doing. So basically this group, I'm trying out these scripts, getting good feedback from the moms, and eventually it'll be something that'll be downloadable by anyone, anywhere.
That's fabulous. And when we're almost done with the interview, you're going to tell where people can contact you. And I'm also having it in the show notes. So I imagine that people contact you, they can tell you to put them on a list to let them know when this will be available.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned singing bowls, and I'm not quite sure that everyone in my audience will know what singing bowls are. So can you explain that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Singing bowls are they're either Tibetan, which those are made from this special metal, or they're made from crystal. And with these singing bowls, the reason they're called that is because there's a small mallet that you use to run around the edge of the bowl, at the top of the bowl, and it makes this really beautiful tone. And so you can mix different singing bowls to have different tones, so it creates this really beautiful, meditative, relaxing music.
That's fabulous. I just love the project that you're working on. It serves so many purposes. I'm just curious, because meditation is, for the most part in my mind, I'm thinking a quiet room with beautiful music, singing bowls, soft voice, and I understand how those bring out and increase the chemicals running through your system, cross over to the placenta. In what way, if at all, I'm curious, is that different when you are singing?
So like if you were singing versus meditating?
Right.
Oh, that's okay. Actually, it's pretty similar. There are endorphins that get released when you're singing, just the same way that they get released when you're meditating. So with singing, you don't have the melatonin that gets released, but you do have endorphins. And singing is fantastic. Definitely a great thing to do to lift your mood. That's one of the studies. There's been a study done on like morning routines. And what it found was that if you have kind of like high energy music that you listen to, that you sing along with in the morning, that'll oxygenate your cells better and kind of get you really well set up for the rest of your day. And of course, most of us, if we were rocked or nursed, or nursed and rocked at the same time when we were little, our moms sang to us. And there's so much about that. I'm sure there's a lot more to be studied yet about the effects of singing, but certainly we've always done it. Mothers have always sung to their babies, and that connection. And babies remember that, they'll, you grow up and you're like, oh, that was the song my mom sang to me, So,
exactly.
I encourage it.
Warm, fuzzy memories, and, that's the other really cool thing about breastfeeding. A lot of people, talk about the benefits of breastfeeding, and there's a lot of health benefits for mom and baby, but what's not talked a lot about is that personal connection, smelling your mom, being close to your mom, the tactile, she's stroking your hair and your ears and your back and your face, and you're looking at each other, so that eye-to-eye connection. And then there's that either cooing or just, baby sounds and or singing, and a lot of that happens at the breast. So there's so much going on during breastfeeding. And yeah, one of them is the singing. And I asked that because when you were talking about the singing bowls and the meditation, it reminded me years ago, I worked at a birthing center in New York, and one of the midwives that I knew at the time, like your meditation mama group, well, she had a singing group. So pregnant moms would all get together, and they would just like jam, for like an hour and a half, and, soft music, loud music, blues, whatever. And there were guitars, there was piano, and they would just jam for like an hour to hour and a half, and everybody loved it.
That's amazing. That's brilliant. I would love to see something like that here. Yeah, that's brilliant. Love it.
Well, it sounds like you could probably, you're charging, getting all this work done. You're really connecting to the things that help mothers during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. The Meditation Mamas group is fabulous. I'm thrilled to hear, and what an opportunity for you to be able to have the groups and to be able to utilize the meditation scripts that you're coming up with, and to be able to get feedback from the moms. I mean, what better way to know what's working than to be there in the trenches, do it, and get the feedback. So that's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've just been loving it. It's been so great to get to be with these women. And of course, now there's this, wonderful community that's being developed from these get-togethers as well. Where these moms, I see other Facebook friends and stuff like that. So it's cool for these like-minded pregnant mamas to be getting together and creating those friendships too.
Absolutely. And, there you go with the, connecting people to the community support. And the more you do during pregnancy, the less you actually have to do afterwards, because you just leave it up to the moms and meeting and chatting, and they make their own friends and they're making their own connections. And it's not such a purposeful thing that you need to do to make sure it happens. It just happens naturally.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really great to see that unfold.
Jennifer, I would like to know if there is anything that I have not asked you about breastfeeding, if there's anything that you would want to share with my audience before we go.
Well, I think just, we touched on so much of the importance of it, but I think just if there's any woman who's struggling, who might be listening to this right now, I just encourage you to reach out and to know that you can do it, that it's just a matter of finding the right support, to help you through that. And there's so many ways, to be giving human milk to your baby. So just lots of resources out there. So I just want to provide that encouragement for every mom to know that you can do it,
Great advice from you, Jennifer, and how lucky the women and families of the Valley of the Sun are lucky to have you as a midwife, and just really being connected with moms and birth and breastfeeding, and the meditation mamas that you're doing. And it's just the work that you're doing is wonderful. And sometimes, I'm thrilled that women are taking advantage of it. And yet sometimes women just don't realize how lucky they are.
Yeah, well, it feels really wonderful. I feel really lucky to get to be in this community where something like that is really welcomed and celebrated. So thank you so much, Lori, for talking with me about all this.
You are very welcome. And can you let us know, the All About Breastfeeding community, if they wanted to contact you and reach out to you, what is the best way they can do so?
Yeah, thank you. Well, on Facebook, that's always an easy way. It's just Moxie Midwifery. So if you just look up Moxie, Moxie, Midwifery, you'll find me on Facebook. You can also email me, Jennifer, Jennifer, at moxiemidwifery.com. You can hop on the website, again, moxiemidwifery.com. So those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. I have a pretty active Facebook page, so that's probably the best social media for me. And yeah, I'd love to answer any other questions or connect.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I really enjoyed our talk. I learned a lot, and of course, I'm sure all my listeners will be learning a lot too. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, Lori. It's been just a pleasure.
Before I end, I have 3 topics I would like to end this show with. The first item is, I love getting email and reviews from you, my listeners. The next best thing for me to do would be able to get to talk to some of my listeners and hear your feedback about the show. What are you liking? What do you want more of? Your thoughts on what I can do to make the show better, and any additional thoughts you have. If talking to me is something you would like to do, just go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/contact. Fill out the form and just put the word feedback in the comments section, and I will send you an email so we can work out a time to chat. The second item is an offer to pregnant moms. There's no reason for you to have unanswered worries or concerns about breastfeeding. Many have said that you would have liked to have the opportunity to talk to me before your baby was born, so you could go over certain things that may have been troubling you about breastfeeding. Questions about maybe your health, medication you're taking, maybe breast surgery you had, your nipple anatomy. Perhaps you have fears or anxiety about breastfeeding and you feel it would be helpful to talk it out before your baby's born. Some mothers just have a bunch of questions that could not be answered in your regular breastfeeding class because of time or privacy. Talking through things can help you clear the way emotionally for an excellent start with breastfeeding. If you would like to Skype me, all you need to do is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype to schedule your online prenatal consult. The third and last item is a reminder about my fabulous online breastfeeding mothers group for you to join. We are meeting for 8 Wednesdays starting May 11th. There is only room for 10 moms, so if you want to join, check out allaboutbreastfeeding.biz support for details about the group, what we're doing, and the dates, and how you can get involved. Until the next show, this is Lori saying goodbye.